Good morning, everybody. So we're going to talk a little more practically today about organizations. Imagine that this is a boardroom right now. Imagine this is your favorite company, Toyota, Coca-Cola, and we're having a board meeting right now. So Philip, I'll ask you a question. What is on our agenda right now? I want everybody in the mindset of what is on the top agenda items of a corporate company right now? What would you say? Any of the top three? Any global Fortune 500.
If it's a public company, meeting its quarterly earnings estimate. Secondarily, essentially, is retention of key staff.
Okay.
And third is durability or innovation of product.
Okay, all right. Yes? Sustainability. Okay, great. Nacho? Are we coming back to the office or not? All right. Christina, what do you say? Board meeting. Global Fortune 1000 company. What are they worried about? What are they worried about? What's on their agenda? What are they talking about right now?
What they're talking about to get great talent.
Yes.
To increase the women and more diverse and inclusive teams.
Okay.
And in the area of IT or digitalize these companies, but at the same time, to don't lose the talent.
Yeah, all right, very good.
And
Very
also,
good.
be part of ecosystems, technology or digital ecosystems.
Yes, okay, got it, right here. Number one thing, just number one thing.
How are we going to stay relevant in 3 years?
What's that?
How are we going to stay relevant to our customers in 3 years, given all the digital startups that are attacking us on the flanks?
Okay, good, thank you all. So I wanted to ground you in this because the world has been disrupted. We're all changing. This is a group that's talking about talent, but I wanted you to think about what are corporations thinking about right now? And so the answer is, I spent a lot of time facilitating board meetings and talking with CEOs and coaching them. And so the answer is, for the last 3 years, talent has been one of the top 3 agenda items for public companies, and many private as well, okay? Talent. But in the last, before the last 3 years, it was not. So it's only been on the top of the agenda for the last 3 years. In the last 2 years, up until this point, basically, it's been focused on talent, the war for talent. How can we attract, how can we retain the best talent? Now, moving forward, there's a new area of focus. And so I want to talk a little bit about both of those. I want to talk about what these companies have been focused on with respect to talent in the last 2-3 years, and what they're going to be talking about moving forward in terms of the future. And we've been talking about that. Oh, I didn't get my clicker. It's on the, okay. Okay, so first, I'll give you a little bit of context about me. I told you the other day, but it's important to know how the world has changed for me with respect to talent, leadership, and development. I ran Wharton Executive Education. So I led executive education in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and this was the time when executive education was the pioneering effort for training managers and leaders, okay? And then it went away, right? So it's still there, but it's not as hot as it was, okay? So that shifted for me. Next, I went to Goldman Sachs. I led the Pine Street Leadership Development Group, which was, and still is, the fundamental leadership development. It's the blue chip best practice organization for leadership development in the world, and Goldman Sachs University. I led Goldman Sachs University. So for a time, in the early to mid-2000s, corporate universities were the best practice. That was innovative. That is how you trained your people, is through this new phenomenon called the corporate university. But again, now that has subsided. It's no longer the best practice. Then I went to Columbia University, and I was dean of the School of Professional Studies. So continuing education, professional studies, for a while, and starting to wane now, was really what universities were using to train and develop the marketplace, okay? So just by an example, Columbia University has 20 schools, 20 colleges and schools, okay? The School of Professional Studies, which I ran, just started offering degrees in 2007, okay? Within 5 years, it's the second largest school at Columbia University, the most profitable by about 25%, okay? 15,000 managers and leaders a year. But that's all going to change right now. It's going to shift to something else. And so I'm in a new job now, 2 weeks in a new job. And Angel, don't tell them that I'm using the wrong template. I have my Columbia template. I'll have my new template pretty soon. But things are changing now, and I've been very critical of universities. So if you read my writings, if you look, I've been very critical about will universities survive? You know, the ed tech movement, you know, which we heard about yesterday, is really thriving. And so now I'm running a university, and people are going to ask me, well, what are you going to do to make sure that that university is relevant? So that's my practical experience. These are 3 of the books that I've written, and I told you about the great skills gap. NASA's in it. Georgia Tech is in it, some other companies. It's an edited volume which talks about how organizations around the world are no longer satisfied with what universities are producing by way of talent. And there needs to be an alternative. And each of them has an alternative. So there's a whole series of case studies, BlackRock, Lyft, General Motors. So you can pick that up or reach out to me, I'll send you one. So let me give you an interesting case. So I told you that we're going to talk about 2 things. One is the war for talent, how do you attract and retain, and the second one is going to be revealed in just a second. So in terms of attract and retain, let's talk a little bit about Google and Amazon. They both, for the last 3 years, number one issue has been how can we get the best talent and how can we keep them, period. You know, shareholder value, product innovation, technology changes and disruption, COVID, it's all been about talent. And they have 2 different approaches, okay? They have decided to approach this 2 very different ways, and lots of organizations and companies are following, and so I'd like to know which one you think is going to work. Google has about 200,000 people, okay? They employ worldwide 200,000 people. And for a long time, about 85, 90% of those employees were full-time employees of Google. They have made a dramatic shift to invest in the gig economy, which means they are hiring contractors. So what they're saying is, our product, the market, everything is changing so fast, we can't develop our talent fast enough. We're going to go out to the open market, we're going to hire contractors, they are going to have the best talent that we need, and as soon as they don't, we'll let them go, we'll get in a new crop. Okay, so now instead of having almost 200,000 full-time employees, they have 100,000 full-time employees, 100,000 contractors. Okay? Now, there's all kinds of issues related to what does that do to the culture? What does that do to the company? But they are contending and they are betting on the fact that contractors are the way to go moving forward. Amazon has a different approach. Amazon has just announced about 9 months ago they're spending $1 billion with a B, $1 billion US to keep their existing employees and retrain them. They're not going to the open market. They're continuing to retrain the employees that they have. And so if I'm an employee and I've been working in compliance and now I need to do coding, they're going to reinvest in me to make sure that I learn whatever the skill is that I need moving forward. So Daniel, who's right? Gig economy or retraining?
Gig economy.
Gig. Why?
Because you want to get the innovation that's out there into your house. If you keep inside and looking inside, then you're becoming stale.
Gig economy. Okay. Rafi. So if he's right, what's the risk?
Well, the risk of that is culture, for the one thing, you mentioned that.
Yeah, culture.
I think the other thing to me is why you have to choose.
What's that?
Why do you have to choose?
Why do you have to choose?
Yeah,
so why do you have to choose? Can you do both? Can you hire contractors and retrain?
I think you can. I think you should.
Amazon's argument is you have to be all in. If you want to be the best, you have to decide. But you say you don't. You can do a little bit of both.
I think you can do a little bit of both because I think there's value in what he was saying. So bringing something from the outside to challenge and to somehow infect, if you want to call it that way, the local culture. But there's also lots of value in people that have been in the company for a long time. They understand the company. Maybe they don't have the skills, but the skills you can train. Okay. Training culture it's way much harder than training skills. Okay. So you keep the culture, you retrain them in other things.
Got it. So Alper, so Philip asked, he said earlier, if it's a public company, we're worried about shareholders. We're worried about making money. So if you're a shareholder for Google or for Amazon, which one do you want them to do to make you more money?
To make more money,
which talent strategy?
Oh, okay. I think for me it's obvious, and that's what we're doing as well. I think you should have both, because your own staff gives you certain legacy and stability, but not contractors, but more freelancers, let's say, brings you dynamism and new elements of culture, and you can always leverage new direction with the freelancers and create stability with the existing. Always both.
Okay, so people are saying both, but obviously there's a reason why these companies have said we can't do both. Yeah.
I would not say both. I would say out of the 50%, are you sure that the 50%, the 20%, or the 10% critical positions are yours?
Okay, okay.
And then the rest, find out.
Find out. Okay. Yeah, one.
I'll say that, I think there's a transition in boards and their thinking. Old boards, old white guys were interested in profit, and so they'd go with Google. Okay. I don't want to pay for hospitalization. I don't want to pay for insurance. I don't want to pay for anything. Let's outsource, and that's the way we did business. Being on boards with women are pretty pragmatic, and they recognize, and I'm being very sexist here, right? So I apologize right off the bat.
Be careful. Huh?
I got it. But I'm the father of a wonderful daughter and 3 granddaughters, and so I tend to favor women. But they have a way of thinking that says we've got to take care of people.
Yeah.
We've got to get people to trust us. I was surprised that
But is that good for business?
That's good for business.
That's good for business.
That's good for business.
So the strategy of
because
not
it's
focusing
good for sustaining business. And
Okay.
somebody mentioned sustainment as an issue before. And sustainment goes to diversity and ecological responsibility and all this stuff about the future.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. So keep an eye on the news. Watch this, because a lot of organizations are falling in the tracks of one of these two organizations. Some are trying to do both, but they have, and we don't have enough time today, but they have very compelling arguments why you can't do both, why you really have to do one or the other and invest. So let me give you some more context. I've been listening to our conversations in here for the last almost day and a half, and we have been talking from the perspective of Generation X, baby boomers, right? Millennials and Gen Z. 75% of the workforce in 3 years is going to be millennials and Gen Z. And you would say, so what? Every generation, next one up, it doesn't really matter. The research has been very, very conclusive. These generations are very different than previous generations for the workforce. We all conform to organizational structure and norms. We did what we were told, we were motivated by money, we're motivated by having good performance, and so it was very easy to have traditional organizational practices and for the older generations to follow and for us to be successful. These organizations, millennials and Gen Z, they don't listen, they don't conform. They have other ideas about what they want and what they need, and we need them to be happy in order for the organizations to do well. And so if you don't know what they need, if you don't know what they want, if you don't know how to manage them, in a couple of years, you're going to be in crisis, right? But nobody's worried about that right now, because right now, they are not the majority of the workforce. They're low level, they're still in school, they're still living in your basement, whatever, but very soon, they are going to be there. And that's why, for the last couple of years, organizations have had at the top of their agenda for board meetings and for leadership meetings, talent. Because they know that this is coming, right? So what I said is, last couple of years, we've been talking about talent, and that's been a strategy, and it's been about attracting and retaining talent. What's next? What are the organizations talking about now for the future? This is a future forum. We're creating hypotheses, we're creating solutions. What are the organizations focused on right now? What are they worried about?
A lot of them are worried about trust.
Trust, okay. What'd you say?
How are they going to organize those people who want to work in a different way?
There you go. That's it. So for the future, talent, they're worried about leadership and management of this generation in particular, right? So if I went around the room and I asked you, what are the top 5 things that millennials need? You're a leader, you're a manager, you're about to assume a workforce that is younger than you and is very particular and specific in what they want and need. Do you know what they need? Do you
Purpose.
understand? I mean, there's a lot of talk about, oh, they're so entitled, and they want this, and they want that, but do you really know what they need, right? Do you really know how to lead and manage them? So what I'm going to do, I know I don't have much time, so I'm going to go through the 5 best practices that leaders are thinking about and corporations are thinking about to be prepared to manage this particular workforce. Okay, so this is the hot topic that I'm focused on moving forward. You've heard of all these things before, but what I challenge you to do is to think about it from the perspective of these leaders, from these organizations, and how they're going to adjust how they lead, how they manage their organizations for this group. Okay, so the first one, we've talked a lot about this, is remote work. There's a lot of debate. There's been debate in this room. Should you have remote work? Should we go back in person full time? Should we have hybrid? What is the answer for millennials? Remote. Is it hybrid? A little bit? Not really. No, it's remote, and it's a different kind of remote, right? There are ways that you can, as Charlie said, there's ways that you can get counseling on mental health. There's ways that you can engage with people for innovation. There are ways that you can collaborate and innovate and do all of that stuff differently. Twitter was the first one to come out when the pandemic hit, and they said, permanently, we are going to be remote. If you want to be remote permanently, you can do that. We will have some centers around the world where you can come in and work physically, but we're going to be remote. And so everybody clamored, millennials, Gen Z, everybody wants to work there. Now, you may say, well, that's the tech industry. You know, not everybody has the tech industry. It's a younger generation, but everybody's going to catch up. JP Morgan did the opposite. Everybody heard what Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, did? Come back. Come back. You got to come back to the office. We're financial services. We're a big bank. We can't do this work without being in person. What he's basically saying is we are too old to understand how to be more innovative, how to adapt, how to change the way in which we work so that we can adjust to this new way of working. So everybody come back, and let's do it the way we used to do it. Yeah. Oh, okay, come on, let's go. Yeah, touch the mic.
The reason that the financial institutions, including the one of which I'm a part, have insisted that people return is the sense that the development of culture, of the maintenance, if you will, of the values, and of the mentoring that is necessary for the next generation cannot be accomplished. We have not yet seen the way it can be effectively accomplished by having people who are not physically interacting on a very regular basis. That may be us old white men's thinking, but frankly, there hasn't been demonstrated yet an effective way of mentoring another generation, particularly as to the culture of how you serve your clients.
So I agree with you on 2 points. One, we have not figured out yet the right way to build culture and innovation and to engage without being in person, so completely agree with you on that. But what's the risk of that, everybody? What's the risk? And shareholder value, the reason why we can't wait is because we have to make money now. And since we don't know how to do it in a new, different way, we're going to do it the old way until somebody else figures it out, right? Yeah.
I just want to query your point that this new generation is really going to want to remote work.
Yeah.
If you look at world value surveys and surveys of young people of the generation you're talking about, it actually doesn't come out this kind of attitude towards. Many of them want to have what they perceive to have been the advantages and the working practices of their parents.
Yeah.
There still is a very large cohort of young people of this generation who really want what their parents have had.
So it's really interesting.
So don't think that that is just...
No, it is, though.
Easy to... No, I don't. I disagree with you very much on this one.
I know you do. I do this all the time. So, you know, often what I do, so imagine this room full of all of you, and imagine an inner circle, an inner group of millennials, and we're having this same conversation. And it's an interesting debate about what they want and what we think they want, right? So the data shows, the research, and I understand what you're trying to say, but the research shows that the definition of remote work that they have is different than and misunderstood by us, right? That's all. That's what I'm trying to say. We think we know what they want. We think that they want what we have. We think that they want to integrate and work together in the way that we have, but they don't. They want to do it in a different way. And so the main point here is that we need to understand what remote work means for this new generation and how we can lead them so that they can be most successful and most productive in that environment. And we don't really understand. So I'll go ahead. I'll move quickly. I'm going to get in trouble here.
Just wanted to point out that I don't quite agree that it has not been proven. There's already companies at scale, and GitLab, the founder of GitHub, which has been mentioned a couple of times, they have 1,100 employees in over 60 countries, and they're fully remote before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they've proven that it's possible.
Yeah, so you're right. There are proofs of concept that are already out there. They haven't been taken to the largest scale of a JP Morgan with 200,000 people, but they have shown it in smaller bits that it can work. And so it is coming. It's a matter of how we want to implement it. So that's why, again,
Jason,
we're in a board meeting and we're talking about this. So it depends on whether you're public or private. It depends on where you are in the world. It depends on what your product and service is. I get all of that. But from the generation that we're talking about, we have to think about, should we adapt now, like GitHub? Should we wait until somebody else does it? Okay, and I'll move on.
Doesn't this create, potentially a huge issue of inequality between or those who can actually do remote working and those who actually need to deliver the package
yes.
and the face-to-face?
So where it creates inequality is in the generations, right? So there is discrimination between people who can use the new solutions that GitHub has created and the people who cannot. Right? And so it's not the same kind of inequality and discrimination that you're talking about. It's a different kind, right? It's one of the generations. So if you are in power, right, and you are older, more experienced, and you want to adopt that new way of working and you're not familiar with it, you don't understand how it works, then you're going to resist that. Right? And so that's the problem. We can start to understand as leaders and managers what's needed, but we don't really want to do it because then that's going to put us out of work.
Jason, does it also create inequalities between industries, for example? So financial services might be more in person than technology, or even our industry, right?
That's perfect.
A college or university cannot be a fully remote workplace.
So an organization like Amazon takes advantage of that. Amazon says, hey, JP Morgan, if you don't know how to manage your workforce for the future, maybe we'll start doing some financial services and we'll see if we can do that.
But now as a college president, don't you worry about losing talent to places like Amazon?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so worried about it. I don't know. I don't know if I should start, right? Okay, next one. Number 2 of 5, social justice. So I'll try to go faster now. Social justice. It used to be the case that if you're in an organization and you're a leader, politics, what you believe has no place in the workplace. You don't talk about your politics. You don't talk about what you believe on social issues. You just talk about work. And then at home, you talk about the other stuff. Now, again, we're talking about millennials and Gen Z. They are requiring that organizations be much more upfront, much more transparent about what they stand for. And then leaders, in order to be an authentic leader, you have to be able to share what you believe as well. And so that's very different. And some of us don't want to share what we believe and what we think. Some organizations are afraid of alienating one side in favor of the other. The data shows, though, that it doesn't matter what you believe and what stance you have, but that you actually have to have a stance and you have to share what you believe. That's what matters most. It doesn't matter what side. So Nike's one example. They have started a very aggressive campaign around women. So they have a TV commercial campaign around women and leaders, and women can make the same amount, should make the same amount of money as men. They are as aggressive, they are as competitive, so they've done a whole campaign around gender, they've done a whole campaign around race, they've supported Colin Kaepernick, an American football player who knelt for the national anthem, and so they've gotten a lot of criticism because they've taken this stance, but if you look at the numbers, they've gotten a lot more money, because look, the millennials and Gen Z are that high percentage of workforce, but they're also the high percentage of the client base in the world as well. And so when they make a stand, believe it or not, agree with it or not, they're getting more of their products sold. Ben & Jerry's, the CEO, is a white male in the US, and he has made a very strong claim. You can read about him, about supporting himself personally, not just the organization, what he believes in. He's written a lot of op-eds in support of a whole range of social justice issues, particularly around Black Lives Matter. And so he's gotten a lot of criticism because, they sell ice cream to everybody around the world, right? And why should you say what you believe? But he has done it, and that has been good for him as a leader, and that has been good for the business. So social justice is important. Yeah. You challenged me again.
I challenge you again. Can you point out any company that has taken a social justice attitude where it is not complementary to its core constituency, its core market? The positions I would argue that Nike has taken have been essentially those that are the majority-held view of their growing market. In the case of Ben & Jerry's, it's owned by Unilever. While the founders were able to express their independent political views, they were very happy to cash out and sell to Unilever. And current management essentially sees its market being those people who are choosing a brand that stands for something. I would argue that, I would say that it's been in the commercial self-interest of virtually every company that has taken what is perceived as a bold social justice position to favor their growing market.
But that's
and that's the point I'm making. Yeah. I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
I was saying that's exactly the point. It's not either or. Your business model does good. As simple as that, and you make doing good, doing well. So
that is the answer. So you made the point, right? You know, taking a stance in today's time is commercially good for business, no matter who you are, right? That's what the data shows. Now, you could argue that you would have some constituents, some clients who don't agree with what you're talking about or what you're trying to stand for. But again, the data shows that it doesn't matter. They're going to be proud of you. They're going to recognize and respect the fact that you are out there. This is the best practice, right? So I can't give you an example of an organization that's done it where it has actually shown the flip side, where it's been bad for them. So Delta Airlines is the closest that I can come up with. Delta Airlines made an early statement, an early commitment that said, we are no longer going to allow the government or anybody else use our airplanes to transport mothers and children from Mexico who are trying to come into this country. We're not going to use our airplanes to take them back or to separate them, right? And they got a lot of criticism because they have big government contracts and they have other shareholders that didn't agree with that level of political positioning at that particular moment. But they did it because they believed in it. The staff who worked in the organization rallied behind that decision. They found innovative ways to make up for those differences, and they're a stronger organization culturally than they were before. Yeah.
Very quick. What about the religion, and I mean religion, of meritocracy? First question. Which is the religion in the US for all global companies today? What about it? And second, what about democracy? One guy, one vote in the organizations. Because social justice for me is not only compensation, it's much more than that. And millennials and young guys, they really want to have a voice and have their opinion count on decision making at the highest level. Shadow COMEXs, I built on one in Accor to do that. So how do you give them power in a very visible way? Is that all of that? For me, this is just to complete democracy and meritocracy. What about that?
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about both of those. But in terms of the first one, it doesn't really matter what the social issue is. So religion, it doesn't matter. You know, the organization's responsibility is to be open, you know, and to be inclusive. And to talk about that openly about that.
I'm talking about the religion of the meritocracy, because
I see. Okay.
It's not religion.
It's getting up, so I guess I need to go faster.
Yeah, I know you have, this is pure gold, and I would love to stay on it all day, but I know you have 3 more points that you're trying to share as essential.
30 seconds then?
If we could please make sure we get those.
So messaging is important. Feedback and the way in which you give feedback as a leader is critically important, and most people don't do this. One example is, in addition to giving feedback to the millennial, to the Gen Z on a regular basis, you have to allow them to give you feedback at the same time. Most leaders today are not willing to accept feedback from the people who work for them. The next one is transferable skills. Jeff talked about this yesterday. So in addition to training, if I'm at Goldman Sachs, I'm the chief learning officer, I'm making sure that everybody gets trained on what they need to do their jobs better. But what millennials and Gen Zs want is, sure, train me on how I can do my job, but also train me on and give me transferable skills that I can use for the next job I'm going to have. The conflict and the tension is, why would I train somebody on something so that they can leave and go to another organization? But if you don't train them and give them transferable skills, they're going to leave anyway. So we could talk about that later. And then metric-driven performance. This is if you went to business school, you studied the Kodak case. Kodak was very successful, market dominant for a really long time. What they rewarded was loyalty. If you stayed at the company for a long time, that was really important. And how you got measured was whether or not you had good relationships with your managers and your colleagues. And then the innovation kind of followed until it didn't. Goldman Sachs is an example of, every year there was a cut. 25% of the people have to go. You get fired, right? So there's a very strong performance culture. The best performers stay. The weakest have to leave. People think that that's cutthroat, but it makes it very, very specific about what it is you have to be doing, what it is you don't have to be doing, and then the weakest don't go away. The last thing I'll say about this is that when you shift from in-person working to remote working, it makes objective measurement of performance much easier. So instead of hanging outside Anhil's office, talking about his wife and kids, or going to the country club and playing golf, now you can't use any of those subjective measures to try to boost yourself. Now what you have to do is do the work and get evaluated on that work objectively, okay? So that's it.